Let me introduce Ron Kugel by reading a brief news summary relative to the attack on the USS Liberty. A former Navy attorney who helped lead the military investigation of the 1967 Israeli attack on the USS Liberty that killed 34 American servicemen says former President Lyndon Johnson and his Defense Secretary Robert McNamara ordered that the inquiry conclude the incident was an accident. In a signed affidavit released at a Capitol Hill news conference, retired Captain Ward Boston said Johnson and McNamara told those heading the Navy's inquiry to, quote, conclude that the attack was a case of mistaken identity, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, close quote. It was one of the classic all-American cover-ups, said retired Admiral Thomas Moorer, a former Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman who spent a year investigating the attack as part of an independent panel he formed with other military officials. The panel also included former U.S. Ambassador to Saudi Arabia, James Akins. Why would our government put Israel's interests ahead of our own? Moorer asked from his wheelchair at the news conference. He was chief of naval operations at the time of the attack. Moorer, who has long held that the attack was a deliberate act, wants Congress to investigate. 15 years after the attack, an Israeli pilot approached Liberty survivors and then held an extensive interview with former Congressman Pete McCloskey about his role. According to this senior Israeli lead pilot, he recognized the Liberty as American immediately. He informed his headquarters and was told to ignore the American flag and continue the attack. He refused to do so and returned to base, where he was immediately arrested. Later, a dual citizen Israeli major told survivors that he was in the Israeli war room where he heard that pilot's radio report. The attacking pilots and everyone in the Israeli war room knew they were attacking an American ship, the major said. He recanted the statement only after he received threatening phone calls from Israel. Did you hear that? The pilots' protests also were heard by radio monitors in the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon. Then U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon, Dwight Porter, has confirmed this. Porter told his story to syndicated columnists Roland Evans and Robert Novak and offered to submit to further questions by authorities. Unfortunately, no one in the U.S. government has any interest in hearing these first-person accounts of Israeli treachery. Israel attacked the USS Liberty using unmarked aircraft. This is the single fact which proves Israel knew exactly who they were attacking. Israel's story is that they thought USS Liberty was an Egyptian ship and therefore a legitimate target of war. Were that true, there would be no reason to attack a supposedly Egyptian ship with unmarked aircraft. The only possible reason to use unmarked aircraft to attack the ship is that Israel knew it was an American ship and intended to sink it, then to blame the attack on Egypt. Moorer, who is a top legal counsel to the official investigation, is in a position to know, agrees that Israel intended to sink the USS Liberty and blame Egypt for it, thus dragging the United States into a war on Israel's behalf. Let me pause. We have been dragged into wars on Israel's behalf for decades, including the present hour. Back to the report. This seems to be a common trick of Israel, starting with the Levant affair through the USS Liberty to the fake radio transmitter that tricked Reagan into attacking Libya to potentially 9/11 itself. Israel's game is to frame Arabs and set them up as targets for the United States. The official U.S. investigation is discredited, and with it, every claim of innocence for Israel that relied on the official investigation as a source. The real question facing the American people is why the U.S. government seems more concerned with protecting Israel after they are caught playing these dirty tricks, rather than doing something to convince Israel not to kill any more Americans. Ron Kugel was a crewman on the USS Liberty. He has co-authored a book that we are going to carry. We've already ordered the first shipment. It's not here, unfortunately, so we don't have any on the table. Should be here probably Tuesday, with tomorrow being a holiday. So we will start mailing these out to people that order them as soon as we get them. I have a feeling that this is going to be one of these deals like what happened with Michael Hoffman and Judaism's Strange Gods. When we first started carrying that book, they sold out of everything and had to do another printing. I got a feeling that's going to happen with this book, so you probably want to order quickly, or if you're in the fellowship, I suggest you get with Julie over at the table after the service and pre-order the book. It's called Remember the Liberty, Almost Sunk by Treason on the High Seas. Ron Kugel is a co-author, and he is our guest that I'm going to turn the podium over to and let him tell his own story. All right, without any further ado, I introduce to Liberty Fellowship, both locally and those of you that are watching online, Ron Kugel, a crew member and survivor of the attack on the USS Liberty. Ron, would you come?
Thank you, Pastor. You are full of surprises. Okay. I want to thank you again, Pastor, and Julie and Liberty Fellowship for the gift box we received when we came in yesterday. It's almost like coming home again. It was just great, just fantastic. And thank you for the dinner last night and the conversation. Without the help and the support of the Liberty Veterans Association, which will be referred to as the LVA from now on, Ernie Gallo, President, Larry Bowen, Vice President, and Bob Scarborough, Treasurer, and then Chaplain and Secretary, you're looking at him. So without this couldn't have happened. I couldn't have gotten up here, and I just want to thank all of them for what they've done. Not me, of course, but the other guys. So anyway, last Thursday night, I thought it was really important that we bring this up because the Liberty Veterans Association has been saying for a long time that we are the most decorated ship for a single action in the United States Navy, which we are, and the most forgotten. Now I almost got to back up a little bit because we're not the most forgotten. Last Thursday night, the Service Navy Association inducted Terry Halbardier, a Silver Star winner, into their Hall of Fame. And this is big. The Secretary of the Navy spoke that night. This is big. It's the biggest thing I think it's ever happened to us, really, in a long time. So I just see that as a step forward, a real large step forward. I'd like to bring up one other thing, because I love the way you bring stuff up sometimes, Pastor. And would you think for a moment that the most trusted men in the United States Navy, which we were, with top secret clearances, checked into our background, I think 2 or 3 generations back, would you think that these people would all combine together after the attack and start hating a bunch of people, a race of people? Would you think they would do that? I mean, they were, their whole background had been checked for years and years and years. And you don't get that top secret clearance by being a person like that. So, if the SPL, Southern Poverty Law Center is watching, we're not anything you say we are. Not one bit. They know who I am. The purpose of the USS Liberty Veterans Association is, they've tried for over 50 years, we've tried for over 50 years to expose the true story of the deliberate Israeli attack on the deliberate attack on the USS Liberty. The mission of the LVA is to pursue the publication of the true story. Nothing more than that. Nothing more than to get the true story out. We've encountered politicians who've been willing to help, but their superiors just weren't interested. And so it's been a real effort after all these years to try to get the point across. And you covered so much, Pastor, that I'm not sure where to go to now, because I don't really prepare for those things. You really don't have to prepare for a speech to anybody if you know the truth. You don't have to remember nothing. You don't have to put nothing together. It's there, you know. So I'm going to pick up with Ernie Gallo, who's our president, a little bit of what he's got in this pamphlet, and I certainly hope that you will pick this up before you go, because it'll pick up on things that I may have missed. It's very possible I could miss. And tell you just a little bit about that morning. For 6 hours the morning before the attack, he's got that worded wrong. For 6 hours, the attack happened that day, but for 6 hours that morning, the ship was subjected to intense scrutiny by Israeli photo reconnaissance aircraft. 12 overflights, flying as low as 200 feet. I might interject this here, that the only reason I'm reading this is because I wasn't topside that day. I was down below, 2 decks down below the main deck, right at the waterline. And so I didn't see a lot of the overflights. I heard my men talking about them, and I didn't see the strafing when it began because I was down below for that too. But we were sailing in international waters off the Egyptian coast. It was a clear and sunny day. Our military mission was to monitor, intercept, and record all radio transmissions in the ambient ether. The attack occurred in about 3 coordinated phases. The Israeli Air Force, the Navy, and the Marines. Following aircraft observations, the Israeli began the attack with 3 fighter jets which strafed, rocketed, and bombed the Liberty. When I was down below, my own personal experience was we went to a general quarters drill right after lunch that day, and that lasted an hour. And after that, I went right back to my workspace, and just as I was to sit down, I heard a sound over my head. It had been at least as high as the ceiling. As I said, 2 decks down, I'm guessing maybe 20 foot above my head. And they were starting to strafe the ship, and I didn't know what it was. I said a lot of things to myself, like, you know, we'd run aground, anything to try to explain the sound I heard I'd never heard before. Being in old Nebraska, well, I wasn't a farm boy, but I lived in a farming community, and if you ever heard hail on a roof, if you could imagine it on a tin roof, that's kind of what it sounded like. Well, what I didn't know was that my shipmates are being killed on the main deck with each strafing run. And the strafing runs were, I think, lasted about 45 minutes. You'd hear it, then it'd be quiet for a while, and then you'd hear it. And 9 men died on the main deck. As I said, I was down below where the torpedo came close to hitting. I would guess that I think the torpedo exploded about 30 to 40 feet from where I was. That was an exciting thing, I'll tell you. But anyway, when the strafing stopped, there was several moments of silence. And what I would like to bring about here is the spiritual side of the attack on the Liberty that I personally saw with my own eyes and experienced. But first of all, the Israelis had everything they needed to put the ship to the bottom. Everything. They had French Mirage jets, they had rocket fire, cannon fire, they had the torpedo boats. They fired 5 torpedoes at us. They hit us with 1. So they had all they needed. So it was overwhelming because all we had was 4 50 caliber machine guns to defend ourselves, and those never really got fired. It's a story of a miracle as far as I'm concerned, because we shouldn't have stayed afloat. And even professionals said so afterwards. We shouldn't have stayed afloat. The torpedo hole was about 30 by 40 foot. I think you could have drove a semi-truck into it. And as I said, I was about 30 to 40 foot from it. Now, the best part of all this, you want to talk about miracles. I just love to talk about miracles. The captain came over the 1MC, which is the ship's intercom, and his words were, "Prepare for torpedo attack." Well, we had already prepared. The watertight doors were closed. And a couple of the other guys have said the same thing I'm saying right now, is how in the world are we going to prepare? We've already done it. And so my first instinct was to go to prayer. I got up from my desk, went over by some electronic equipment that I was operating, and started in prayer. And I promised the Lord a lot of things I couldn't. There's no way I could have. I promised him I'd be in church every Sunday for the rest of my life. He knows that. He knows that. Yeah, but he was rolling in the aisles. What do you think? But anyway, I know that he reads the heart. He knew I was scared to death. And he must have heard the prayer, because I walked back to my desk, and please don't anybody call for a straitjacket. When I walked back to my desk, I heard a voice. It said, "Get down now." And I didn't move fast enough. The next thing that I remember was my nose flat to the steel deck. I don't even know how I got there. 5 seconds later, the explosion occurred. I heard the shrapnel flying over my head, which was killing everybody in the compartment. Everybody that I was close to was dead, except me. And the compartment turned into an instant swimming pool. The water was up to about to my shoulders. And I made my way to the hatch, to the ladder that would lead to the deck up above. And a lot of guys were trying to get up that same ladder. It was a lot drier up above us than where we were. And as I reached the top of the ladder, the hatch, I don't know if you're acquainted with the steel hatches on a Navy ship, but the hatch is this long and this wide, and there's a hole in the middle that you can actually open up without opening the whole hatch, which will allow a body to get through the hole. So when I was climbing the ladder, I got almost to the top of the ladder, and someone reached his hand out and just pulled me right straight up. Somebody pretty strong. And I headed for the main deck. When I got out there, or when I got close to the main deck, Lieutenant George Golden was standing there trying to start the emergency generators. And he said, "Ron, you will turn around and go back down there and make sure everybody gets out, or has gotten out." So I went down, begrudgingly because I didn't want to. But an order is an order, and that's what you do. So I went down, and by the time I got down there, the hatch was completely open. The whole hatch was open, and I hollered down there, and all I could hear was, it was dark down there, and I could hear the sloshing water. And I hollered down, and I couldn't get anybody's attention. So I went back and went outside. I went back out on the main deck, and I told Lieutenant Golden that there was nobody down there that answered the call. Got out there, and here was all my friends down there. The other guys that had escaped, that had gotten out of there. And this took in a lot of compartments, okay? The people in my compartment, almost all of them died. But there was other compartments that were affected. And they were out there slapping each other on the back, shaking each other's hands, and just tickled to death to get out of that dark, watery grave down there. Philip Turney, who was a ship fitter, third class then, called me up one time long after the attack had happened. He says, "You know what was going on with you guys?" And I said, "No, we were happy. We were really glad to get out of there." And he says, "You're out there slapping each other on the back, shaking each other's hands, and they're still firing. The machine gun bullets were just flying everywhere. You got there congratulating each other." And I consider that another miracle, because I don't think they got another one of us. Going back to the voice, because I love this, because I can understand it, and how I got from standing here to flat down over here is still a mystery to this day, unless you think about it in a spiritual manner. Who put me there? Who may have said, "Well, you're going to live. That's going to happen for you. You're going to live." So there was a lot of miracles, some that I don't even know of even to this day. I mean, that occurred that day, which led me to this conclusion. No matter what they might say, I've said to myself, where was God that day? Where do you think he was? I know where he was. He saved the Liberty for a special reason. I'm probably doing that special reason tonight, and talking to you people and letting you know that God is all-powerful. And if I could say something to President Trump right now about his thoughts about God and the power, I'd say, don't mess with it. Amen. Don't mess with it. It'd be a terrible crime if, for historical reasons, that the truth about the USS Liberty was never told. A crime to your family and mine. President Trump has said, "Let's make America great again." Okay. I can tell you of a crew who survived the attack, who's been trying to make America great again for over 50 years now. Because we love your family and our family. We do. And we wouldn't have stood this long if we didn't. Praise be to God.
Let's give Ron a great hand.